Let's take a look at the bigger picture. Joining me now, Nick Tell, CEO at Armory Group. And we're going to talk a lot about the market, the election, the economy, some of the chaos maybe. Welcome.
Thank you, Nicole.
Nice to see you.
Good to be here in person.
So where does your mind start here on this conversation?
I think there is right now a real question mark on what happens post-election, as we're seeing both candidates really putting politics ahead of good economic policy in order to get sound bites rather than sound economic policy for the economy going forward. And really the election is going to determine, once the candidate gets chosen, what the market's going to think about those policies and whether they think they're likely to actually happen.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. I mean, I think that if you were to ask 10 people on the street, do politicians sometimes say things and then, you know, it's sort of muddled or it doesn't actually happen? It's not, it wouldn't be uncommon for many of those folks to say, yeah, you know, I mean, I think politicians do say some of that stuff. So now at this point now, you know, we have no real candidate that seems to be the clear winner, right? What kind of chaos could ensue? Because really, we have nothing to go by. We can't say the incumbent versus the newbie. The incumbent's not the incumbent, it's the vice president. The newbie's not the newbie, he's the former president. So I feel like some of the comparisons are not identical either.
They're not, and I think chaos is a great word, because we've had chaos here, geopolitical chaos, and the Biden administration has not done a great job to help solve that. I'm not sure the other two, the new candidates, Harris and Trump, will do so either. But Trump, by definition, and I've had some personal experience with him, basically uses chaos as a negotiating strategy. And he looks at that as a way to confuse and to pit people against each other. And that's my biggest concern, is that there's already chaos in the world. Now we add chaos with candidates that basically that's what they intend to do as a strategy. And some of the policies that Trump is talking about are ones that he could actually implement on his own. Massive deportations, tariffs, without help, without the assistance of Congress. And that's really the types of challenges we've got if he gets elected, what impact it's going to have on the economy. It's all about sound bites, but ultimately it's going to create and basically create worse inflationary pressures. If they do mass deportations, we have, you know, basically an economy that'll grind to a halt, because those are important laborers for our economy. And so that's the uncertainty that's around this presidential candidate and this election, because it really is making a choice on what type of stability versus chaos that you're looking for.
Well, you've made it clear how you feel about a Trump administration. How do you feel about a Harris administration?
I think Harris is...
Because when they asked her, would you do anything differently, she said, I can't think of anything.
I know. That's, you know, talk about the mistake of the century for her candidacy, to basically not in any way try to distinguish herself from the Biden administration in that interview, that it was an easy layup question. I think at the end of the day, she will be different, but how different, we don't know. And so, but the fact is that stability is not a bad outcome. You know, things have improved significantly. Inflation is on the minds of all Americans, but you've had inflationary pressures declining. What you don't want to do is create issues that then can cause inflation getting worse again. And now it's just a question of, is stability better than instability and better than chaos? And so even some of her policies I don't agree with, but nevertheless, but they're going to require Congress, like, for example, price controls, disgorgement of profits. Those are all nice sound bites, but at the end of the day, will only make inflationary pressures worse. And so I'm not a big fan of the policies, but nevertheless, I think that stability is going to come out of that election if she gets elected, where I think you'll have instability with Trump.
We might just get much of the same, and we're sort of plugging away, and folks may be okay with that.
But it's not a bad thing, you know, because right now with inflationary pressures declining and wages going up, eventually wages will catch up.
You have the national debt going up too.
Well, that's fiscal. That's a problem with both the Republicans and the Democrats. That's fiscal irresponsibility, simply because they're trying to.
Will it go up more with one than the other?
I think they both will. I think neither one is fiscally responsible, you know.
Yeah.
And so they're going to have to deal with the fact that that's the spending is a way to sort of buy votes.
His argument pertaining to tariffs is he feels that GDP will be growing so quickly that the tariffs won't in fact cause inflation.
But tariffs only are relevant to the extent that the prices are too low, and as a result, manufacturing jobs, you know, go out of the country. So you already, by definition, have to increase pricing to make the jobs to come back. If that's your argument, that tariffs are that really it's an issue with cheap goods. And so that's where it doesn't make a lot of sense. Ultimately, manufacturing jobs could come back with tariffs,
right,
but that could take 10 years.
Yeah. Well, job openings at 3.5-year lows, confidence at 9-month highs. So you do have sort of back and forth
right. And
stuff
it's
happening.
It's not a bad thing, right? Where we're at right now.
For Trump, big picture, some of the policies that he's trying to implement, he can also look to his past 4 years, where prior to COVID, we had a booming economy, wonderful employment for many different races, not just one. There were some bright spots to the Trump administration where they're not, where you're doing research, right?
I can't.
And he didn't cause wars or cause a ton of crazy geopolitical chaos, did he?
He didn't, but at that point in time, you had the administration, and that's why 25 of his former administrators have said that they kept him in check. And a lot of the chaos that he was creating through his sort of statements were being kept in check by his administration.
Right.
I'm afraid that's not going to be the case. He's learned his lesson, and so what he says he's going to do, I think he will do.
Right. And what's your biggest fear?
My biggest fear is the chaos that he creates by just talking about different extreme aspects. Just resolving the Ukraine war, just simply for the sake of resolving the Ukraine, the massive deportations in order to solve for supposedly the immigration
Why does this
problems.
matter to the U.S.? You said the economy will go down with the massive deportations.
That's why it matters.
And what other Ukraine you mentioned?
Well, tariffs is the other
tariffs.
The tariffs.
So you're worried about a recession under a Trump administration?
I'm worried about a weakening economy that comes as a result of all these statements that ultimately get implemented.
Nick Tell, CEO at Armory Group, thank you very much
for
being
having
here.
me.
Appreciate it.